On this episode of Still Loading, Objection! Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, we are talking about the first game in the Phoenix Wright series. But I couldn't do this alone, as I really can't do anything alone on this show. I'm bad at vamping for an hour by myself. But with me is video game journalist Kate Gray. Kate, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Although I should have warned you this before we started. There is a storm going on outside. So if I suddenly disappear, it's the storm.
It's the storm. It just came in and stole I don't know where I was going. I was trying to make a joke and then my brain just farted in the middle of it. Anyway, so Kate, for those who don't know you, talk a little bit about yourself. What do you do and why are you on this episode specifically?
What do I do? As you've mentioned, I'm a video game journalist. Currently, I'm largely writing about Nintendo games, which is how I started in the industry. I wrote for Official Nintendo Magazine, which is now no longer in existence, RIP. And then I did a bunch of stuff. I was a video producer for a while. I was an Xbox YouTube person for a bit. I moved to Canada. And then I did narrative design for a bit. And now I'm back writing about Nintendo. So sort of come full circle on that. But I do a lot of other stuff on the side. I write for the Minecraft website sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a thing that like not many people know about me, actually. Like even my friends are like, hey, Kate, I was looking for something and I found your name. What's that? Is that you? And I'm like, yes, that is me. It's a fun gig. I don't know who reads it because there's no comment section on the Minecraft website. So like,
well, that could be a good thing because
it's a great thing. I don't know if anybody's reading my work on there, but they seem to like it. They being the Minecraft people, so that's nice.
I would assume that would mean that people are reading it because they would stop going to you if it didn't get engagement. Therefore, they're seeing good engagement numbers. Therefore, people are reading it.
My like little anxiety brain voice is going, yeah, but it's Microsoft. They can just throw money into a hole.
They got that fuck you levels of money.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, you know what? If they want to throw money at me and I'm terrible and they don't mind, then I can't really complain. That's a pretty awesome.
Don't say anything. Just
no.
You're enjoying what you do and you're getting paid for it. That's the most important thing.
If they're listening to this, I really don't listen to this anymore. Well, it's too late.
Do you want me to cut that out? You want me to cut that out? Okay, just making sure. I don't want to get you fired over just a couple jokes.
You won't. It'll be fine.
And yeah, I reached out to you because you were asking to go on other podcasts. I was like, I heard you on The GameCube Was Cool, and shout out to my friends Mike and Neil over at The GameCube Was Cool. And I asked you to come on. I'm like, literally pick any game because even if it's a game I've never played, I like to be able to learn about it. That's one of my favorite things about video games is learning about stuff, whether I even enjoy it or not. It could be a game I hate. I don't care. I like talking about it. So you specifically asked for the Phoenix Wright game. So we were focusing on the first one because that's kind of, what my show does. So why do you like Phoenix Wright and what drew you into the series?
So I'm going to do the annoying thing that I will probably do several times in this podcast. And instead of answering the question, I will start telling a story.
That's all that I need.
So I've always been into games, but growing up as like a teenage girl, I didn't realize I was into games because I didn't have anyone to talk about games with because I went to an all-girls school. Which is not to say that girls don't play games. It's just no one was talking about playing games.
And it's also one of those things, unfortunately. I don't know how old you are, but up until I would say the last like 5 to 10 years, it was still very much a boys club in the
Oh
gaming
yeah.
thing. And it still is to an extent, but like
Yes.
it was a lot. I would assume it was a lot harder for girls to find ways to connect with each other, considering it. I mean, games were marketed towards boys for so long. But
Yes.
anyway, so it
Well,
makes
that's
sense
like
why it
one
was
of the
hard.
reasons. Like, I didn't know I don't call myself a gamer, but for ease of talking about this, I didn't know I was a gamer.
Yeah,
Because all the adverts are like, "Hey, boys, do you like nipples?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not a boy."
but I
So
do like
I
no. I'm just kidding.
I guess this advert isn't for me, so I'll just keep playing games that I like. And I actually was subscribed to Official Nintendo Magazine before I worked for it, which was pretty cool. And so anything that ONM would be like, "Wow, this is amazing," I'd be like, "Okay," and then buy it. Not everything. There were some games like Kirby and Kid Icarus that I was just like, I'm not interested in that.
Hmm.
But I'm relatively sure that that's how I actually discovered the Ace Attorney games.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
my thing to do was usually to walk into a game shop and see what they had and like pick up a box and read the back of the box. That's how we used to find video games. And that's probably like how I picked up Ace Attorney and a bunch of other games from my childhood is I just walked into a shop and I was like, this looks cool, and spent like probably £20 on it, which is weird to think about because it would be like 40 now. Um
I don't know what that would be in USD because I know so you were I know this is just a little bit of backstory. So you were born in the UK, but now
yeah.
you live over in Canada, correct?
Yeah, I moved to Canada when I was 25, which is about 5 years ago. Um but I was living in London before that, and then before that I was at uni, and before that I was at school. So that was all in the UK.
Okay, okay.
So most of my stories about video games are from England times. Uh, like that one. That's from
Yeah,
England
yeah.
times.
Okay, okay. All right, so that's how you first discovered it. God, I miss video game stores. All we have now is GameStop. Well, actually, you know what? There's a bunch of local retro game shops now, which is really fun
Really?
to go. Oh yeah, I
Oh,
don't know about
I
where
miss
you're at,
those.
but
There's
the,
like nothing here. It's
well,
awful.
if COVID, well, when, not if, I'm an optimistic person at heart. When
Yeah.
COVID ends, if you ever down in the Philly area, let me know. There's a shitload here. There's like
Awesome.
there's one my favorite one's like 30 minutes away from me, but there's so many. There's a
Yeah.
lot of good stores. But yeah, I miss going to stores like that. In fact, you're talking about like the only way you could, know if you wanted a game was by looking at the box.
Mhm.
The way I kind of recreate that feeling is before I had a kid, before I had a little bit more disposable income, I would actually go to I would go to one of those stores and I would give myself a budget of like $10 or $10 or $15, and I would have to find the strangest looking games possible under that $10, 1 to 2 games. And I found one for the Super Nintendo called Pink Goes to Hollywood, and it was just a Pink Panther game.
Okay.
It was a
I did
bad
There were
Yeah.
Pink Panther games?
Yeah, there's a Pink
Wow.
Panther game on the Super Nintendo. But on the label, you wouldn't know that by the side label. The side label just says Pink Goes to Hollywood, which means
Mm.
nothing to anybody. You wouldn't know it's a Pink Panther game until you looked at the front half of the label and saw the
Yeah.
Pink Panther like cartoon. So there was that, and then I also found a game. It turned out it was a Street Fighter clone, but it was called Tough Enough, like TUFF, the letter ENUFF, and it wasn't great, but I bought it because it was that. I also There was Power Pigs of the Dark Ages. That was another weird one I found.
Wow, you bought a lot of games I've never heard of.
I had never heard of them prior either, so
Yeah.
I that's why I got them. Like they were cheap. They were
Yeah.
like $5. I'm like, I'll take a gamble for $5 on a game that looks dumb. Why not?
I had a subscription to a service that I don't know if it still exists, but it existed when I was at university and shortly before then, which was like a Netflix. You know when Netflix used to send like DVDs to your house?
Was it GameFly?
No, it was called Boomerang,
Boomerang.
but it
Okay.
was probably very similar. Like you would pay like pennies. I think my subscription was like $5 a month for a single game every month. So I had to choose really carefully because that's not a lot of games.
No,
And a lot of the games I borrowed were actually good enough that I was like, I'm going to buy this for myself. But a lot of them were not very good.
that's the risk you take. It's like the back
Yeah.
end. Like, did you have something similar to, like, I don't know what it was like over in the UK, but, like, Blockbuster was such a huge
Mhm.
thing for kids in North America in the 90s. Was there
Yeah.
some other equivalent? Was it this service, or was there some other type of or was there Blockbuster over in the UK? I have no
We
idea how
had
far.
Blockbuster. Yeah,
I just
yeah.
wasn't sure how far reaching the company went. I know it was huge, but I
Very.
never know if it goes where it's at
My
outside of the
main
US.
Blockbuster memories are like VHS related. We didn't get that many games.
Okay.
Although we did get, I think, Yoshi's Story.
For
I
the
get Yoshi's
64?
Story and Yoshi's Island mixed up. Yeah, it was the N64 one, so it was
It's
Yoshi's
Yoshi's Story,
Story.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And we were just like, wow, this isn't very good.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sorry, we've diverted so
Sorry.
far. No, that is not your fault. I was asking about Blockbuster in the UK.
It's all right. Yeah.
I'm the one that brought that up. So, Phoenix Wright. Let's give a little bit of background on the Phoenix Wright games. It was originally released for the Game Boy Advance in Japan on October
Mhm.
12th, 2001. The lead designer and creator of the series, Shu Takumi, which I love his name. I don't know what it is, but it's just fun to say.
Yeah.
Like, and he just seems very, like, pictures of him, he seems like such a nice man. I
He's
don't know.
such a dad character. I love him.
Yes.
Like, I have a page open here because I get a lot of the Phoenix Wright cases mixed up because a lot of them aren't related to each other.
Hmm.
So I have that so I can make sure that I'm talking about the right game. And there's a little picture of Shu Takumi at the bottom, and I'm just like, oh, he looks so friendly. He's
I
such a
know,
sweet
right?
person. Ugh,
He just looks so pleasant. I've never heard him speak. I know nothing about him. Well, I mean, I know a little bit. He worked at Capcom, or does he still work at Capcom? I would
I
assume
think
so. Yeah, he still is
so.
a writer and director at Capcom. His first couple games was he worked on a game. I'm not even going to try to say because my Japanese is awful. But the second game that I see that he worked on, according to Wikipedia at least, was Resident Evil 2. And then he worked on
Mm.
Dino Crisis 1 and 2, and then the his boss told him, "Here, take 6 months and make whatever game you want. Doesn't matter what it is."
Yeah,
And
that's the
so we
dream.
have Ace Attorney. That's how we
Yeah.
got it. It took 10 months, apparently, not the original 6th. And it was originally going to be a Game Boy Color game when they started designing it, but they saw the potential of the GBA and switched over from there. Um, I was getting a little confused. I was looking up when after the success of the first game, he came back from vacation and his boss like, all right, you have 3 months to write the next 5 episodes for the next game. So he had to write all five of the entirety of the second game in 3 months. That's intense.
Yeah. I think it shows a little bit.
Which one?
That's mean. I don't want to be mean. I love Shu Takumi, but the
That
second
was Justice
one,
for All, right? That's the
Justice
second
for
one.
All.
Yeah. I'm literally holding the games. I'm like, oh God, which one is it?
I get Justice for All and Trials and Tribulations mixed up too because the titles don't really refer to what happens in the game. They're just kind of generic court related
Mm-hmm.
titles, I guess. Um, but yeah, the second one is sort of like it's still really good. I'm trying to remember what cases it has. I mean, well, I won't say because spoilers. You haven't
Because
played
I
it yet,
haven't played it
right?
yet. I haven't played it yet. I've only played
Yeah.
the half the reason we're doing just the first one is because it's the only one I've played so
Yeah.
far. And I loved this game. Just to say flat out, I know obviously you did too. That's why you asked to do this episode. But like, I really did like this first game, but it's hard for me to find motivation to play the sequels only because these games you have to focus very much on them, not just because they're a detective style game, not just because they're like a mystery puzzle game, but because like there's just a lot of reading and the games take a long time to get through, and I do not have a lot of time in my life. So
Yeah.
uh the in fact my memories of this was when I was playing it for the first time about I want to say like 2-3 years ago. I
Mhm.
remember my car had to get repaired, and it was one of those things where thankfully it was under a warranty, but it was going to take like 3 hours to fix because it was some big mechanical thing. So I just sat down in the car dealership where I was getting repaired at, brought my 3DS, and I popped in Ace Attorney, the first Phoenix Wright game, and I just sat there. I'm literally by myself in this showroom. The receptionist all the way at the other end, and I'm just some random guy just sitting there for 3 hours playing my DS, and that was such a good memory. I know it's weird,
Yeah.
but it's like, I shouldn't say it's weird. I know that's kind of such a strange random memory, but that's what I think about when I think about this game. That's what I remember, excuse me, when I think about this game.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, let me see if I have any other quick things. But while I'm double checking my notes, you talked about how you first discovered the game, but do you have any memories tied to this game from when you played it?
So I don't remember fully um, playing this game, but what I do remember is that I played them out of order. Now, I didn't know that they were out of order. And also, I'm going to have to tread carefully on the things that I reveal because I don't want to spoil it too much. But basically, I played the second game first, which
Oh,
is Justice
okay.
for All, which, is no offense to Justice for All, but it has some really duff cases, and they are generally agreed to be duff cases. But I still liked it enough to be like, I should check out more of the games in this series, and then realized that I'd play the second one first. And so people who are listening to this, spoilers for like the first couple of hours of the first game. But basically in the second one, your mentor
Oh,
is
we're going to
dead.
be spoiling the hell out of the
She's
first game,
yeah.
just so you know.
She is a ghost. That gets very weird.
I mean, that really happens so quickly in the beginning of the game.
It
Like
does, yeah. So I think it's
it's
okay.
yeah.
Spoil it. So I knew that she was dead. And I was like, who is this? Why should I care that she's dead? And then I was like, oh, that's the sequel. And I played the first one, and it's like, wow, here's this alive person. And I'm like, well, she's not gonna be alive for long. So like it actually the bit where she dies just completely like didn't hit me like it should have done because I've ruined that for myself. And recently, over the past like year or two, I've been getting my partner to play through the games because I'm like, this is one of the things that matters most to me is the Ace Attorney series, and I need you to get on board. If we're gonna be together, you're gonna have to play Ace Attorney. He
Yeah.
made me play Bloodborne. It's only
Oh,
fair.
well,
No, I
Bloodborne's a good game,
like
but
Bloodborne.
I don't because I'm bad at it. That's
I'm
literally the
also bad at it, but I just grind a lot and it works out. So I get to experience the Ace Attorney series in the correct order and through his eyes. Um,
that's got to be really cool.
it's so cool. He's currently on the fourth game in the series, Apollo Justice, which is my personal favorite, and I'm very like tensely watching to see if he's like, this game sucks. Kate, you have bad opinions. He loves Edgeworth, like relates to him a lot. Edgeworth is like this grumpy dad guy, but he's only like 24. But he has like gray hair, and he's like,
That
I'm
is
a
a
dad
good
guy.
description for Edgeworth. That is a very good
Yeah.
description. He's the epitome of the old man on the porch yelling at kids running by the street and not even touching his lawn, just like yelling at them.
It's also fun to be kind of like watching all the stupid stuff that happens in Ace Attorney. Like it's nothing like how actual law works. And also, as I've kind of hinted at, everyone is 10 years younger than they should be. So Detective Gumshoe, who is the main police guy that you deal with, is meant to be
I
this
love
like
that name so
washed
much.
up, like, oh, I don't earn enough. I have to eat instant noodles every day. And I'm just an old guy. And you're like, how old are you, Detective Gumshoe? Oh, you're 35. You're not an old man. You're like pretty young, actually, even by
Yeah.
the standards of 20 years ago. And like Phoenix and Edgeworth are both like 24, and they're like, yes, I'm an experienced prosecutor. Like, no, you're not. You just graduated. Anyway,
I did there. You should, if you haven't, you ever listened to the podcast Retronauts or heard of it?
I have heard of it. I think my partner listens to it.
if you get a chance to listen to their Ace Attorney episode, because they
Yeah.
talk about all three games, but they do reference, and I don't remember it, and nor I kind of wouldn't want to because I feel like I'd be taking some of their talking points from their episode. But
Mhm.
they do talk about the difference in in the legal system between Japan and the
Yeah.
U.S. So even though this game takes place in the U.S. thanks to the localization,
Yep.
it is still a very Japanese game in terms of apparently a lot, like there's a lot of big differences in how they handle court cases. Now,
Yeah.
it still is played up for to an extreme because obviously you don't in the real world you don't only have 3 days to get all of your evidence together and
Yeah.
present a case to the court in trial, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I feel like what we should do real quick, I have a couple more fun facts, and then I think we
Okay.
should run down the characters because we've been kind
Okay.
of talking a little bit about the characters nebulously. So I feel like we should go through a list, and thankfully I wrote them all. Well, I didn't write them all down. I have them all up on a website so that way
Yeah.
I don't forget anybody because it's so easy to.
Yeah.
Um, so the first game, it is there's 5 episodes total. Well, there's 4 episodes originally, and then they added a fifth one in the DS release for North America.
Mhm.
Um, there was the development for the game started in the summer of 2000, and like I said before, it was a 10-month development cycle. There was a total of only 7 people working on the game, including Shu Takumi, and which
Wow.
is nuts. I read an article with him where now those games have like 30 to 50 people on it, so that's still small for a game development company, but like that compared to what it was at 7, that's a pretty
Mm.
big jump. um Something I did find interesting when it was on the GBA specifically, they had less space to store everything, so that's why all of the case file images are monochrome. They didn't want them. That's why they kept them in black and white because that saved a lot of space. They wouldn't have to. They could actually make them in more detail. They could put them in 16-bit instead of 8-bit, and they could
Mm.
fit more of it in it. And I think he said it was like a third of the size, like less than a third of the size of the other images. So I think that's a really clever way of working around your limitations. So
Yeah.
it's very clear like this is crime scene photos or evidence or something like that. And that's why it was all in black and white. So I thought that was really cool. Let me see. Was he originally intended to have each of these episodes not be connected? Like now, once you play these games, I know there is a connection between the first game to the third game. Like there's a big story that kind of connects all three. I
Yeah.
don't know it yet, but I know there's a story that connects all three. He did not intend that originally. He actually came up with that midway through episode 2, and he realized he hit a wall, like a writing block, and he wasn't quite sure how he was going to write his way out of it. So he decided to have everything, have the story be all connected. So from that point on, in the subsequent games, he would come up with the full story and then write out the individual episodes.
Okay. Again, not to be mean, I feel like you can kind of tell. There's a lot of scrappiness in Ace Attorney, which is part of the reason I love it because they're very much like, and this, and you're like, did you just make that up? No, no, I knew this the
You
whole
at least
time.
have some grounds to criticize it because you're a writer. You
Oh,
even said you
yeah.
have you did narrative work. I forget what
Mhm.
exactly the specific role you said it was, but you worked on in some narrative capacity in video
Yeah.
games. I'm a shitty writer. I am not great. I do not understand grammar at all. Um, well, I understand it well enough, but it's still not it's still not good. There's half the times I'll be writing a sentence. I'm like, I think there should be like a comma in here somewhere, but I don't know where to put it. So I'm just going to put a period and have a really like third grade level sentence where it's like, I did this today. I
Yep.
am not a good writer at all. I wish I was. This is actually a funny story. It's a bit of a tangent and side thing. When I was in college, university, I didn't do well on the entrance exam, the SATs for us. I don't know what if you have like any entrance exam type of thing to kind of get your
Yeah.
general placement. I didn't do well in the English portion of it. Not surprising. I'm not a good writer, but I will say that the class they made me take a class that didn't count towards my degree. So like I had to pay for it, but it didn't count as any of the requirements. It was just basically to get me up to what they needed me to be or
Mm.
what they said I needed to be. Um, and let me tell you, I definitely learned a little bit from it because, like I said, I'm still not a great writer, but it was something that I could have learned in a week versus a full semester. Because I kid you not, my final exam for that class, for my remedial writing class,
Mhm.
was write 3 paragraphs.
That's it?
That was it. That was the
Wow.
that was my final.
I like that.
I know, right? And I kind of went, really? This is
Mm,
this is this is it? And
yeah.
then when I end up having what is it? I think it was English 101. I went from that that end to the polar opposite, where my professor was relentlessly difficult,
Mm.
where he would make us write an essay, bring it in for peer editing, like just to get feedback from other people, and then afterwards we had to rewrite, instead of making corrections, like, when someone edits it, you make the corrections, right? That would be the logical thing to do. No, you have to rewrite the essay and use different talking points. So if you're going with a really standard, like intro, 3 points, here's my, intro with your thesis or your theory, then your 3 supporting whatevers, and then your conclusion, you have to completely throw out those 3 points you made and find 3 new ones. So
Ugh.
and it's like, well, what's the point of even trying on the first one then? But I did try
Yeah.
on the first one, and that's why I was getting D's and C's, because he was like, there was one I thought I had a really good intro paragraph, and I kept it, and he just crossed out the whole thing and didn't even count it. So I
That's
was
so
like, why the
mean.
fuck am I trying? I ended up dropping the class, switching over to a different professor, and passed.
Good.
It was very strange. Sorry, that's a complete side tangent on my college history. Yeah, so let me see if there's anything left. The one thing, this might be a little funny for you then, because you're just talking about how the writing, what you enjoy it, but it's a little bit on the weaker side at points.
Yeah.
Um, Takumi thinks he's better at writing stories than he is at writing characters. Um,
Interesting.
that's what, in the one interview I read, he was saying that he thinks he's much better at coming up with a story than the characters, but he will say that he learned a lot from writing the characters of the first game.
Okay. I'm trying to think if that's true. I mean,
I mean,
I don't know the writing process for Ace Attorney, but I gather that if they only had 7 people working on it, he probably wrote the bulk of it. Um, I
I'm pretty
think the
sure he wrote all of it.
characters, yeah, like you'd have to, right? Like you've got one guy for programming, art, UI, that pretty much just leaves one person for writing. Um, the characters in the first game, I think, are fine. Like I think they're pretty well done. In Ace Attorney in general, the characterization in the early games tends to veer towards the kind of caricature. Like people aren't just like, I'm a stoic person that enjoys being right. They're like, I'm a goofy guy that loves women. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like it
Larry.
feels a bit more exactly, you know who I'm talking about because they're
And
so well
the Can
characterized.
we just talk for a second though? Just thinking of
Yeah.
these characters, the names chosen for all of these characters. Larry Butts.
Yes.
I will
I
still never laugh. I will never not laugh at that name. I know it's childish, but if you name a character Butts, you're my
Yeah.
hero. And
Yeah.
the fact that he names his detective Gumshoe is really funny
Yeah.
as well. Dick Gumshoe, Dick for Private Eye. I mean, it's
Mhm.
so funny. Uh, though it's all the side characters, all the supporting cast that have the fun. Not all of them, but the supporting cast has all the fun names. Phoenix, I forget. I actually wrote down what his name in Japanese is. I don't. Do you know
Uh,
what it is?
I I always forget half of it. He's called something Naruhodo.
Naruhodo-kun,
Yeah.
which means I see or that's right. So that was even a pun to
Yeah.
a degree. Um, which doesn't
Yeah.
really. Phoenix Wright. He's right. I don't know.
He's right.
Maybe that's their play on it. But yeah, so your characters are Phoenix Wright, who is obviously the main character. He is the defense attorney for the
Mhm.
series until Apollo Justice comes along. I'm assuming those are different characters, right?
Yeah, Apollo Justice is a new younger attorney. I can't say anything about him because it's a spoiler. He
It's
wears
okay.
red. That's not a spoiler. He
I can
wears a
look at a
little
picture of him.
waistcoat and he's got little spiky hair, but in a different way to Phoenix Wright. It's very exciting.
It's a different kind of spiking. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it. Then your rival, the Gary to your Ash, is Miles Edgeworth,
Yes.
who's according to the wiki, he's the main antagonist of the game, which I guess like he is, but I mean, is
It's like
can the main antagonist?
professional antagonism. Like he's
Yeah,
not
because it's like he's not
trying
always
to
the
screw you
bad guy
over.
of each episode.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then your mentor, like you said, she dies very early on, Mia
Yeah.
Fey. And then her sister Maya, who's more of a kind of, is she clumsy? I forget. It's been a minute since I've.
She's definitely goofy. I don't know if she's clumsy, but there are characters that will come into later games that are definitely clumsy. Maya's more like easily distracted, I guess.
And then you have, like we mentioned, Larry Butts, but Larry Butts is Phoenix's childhood friend who you represent in the first case of the game. Detective Gumshoe is the detective that kind of is there to help you, but at the same time not, because he's bound by the court system, but he's not the greatest detective, so he fucks up and he gives you
Yeah.
stuff that he shouldn't.
Yeah.
And then you
He
have
never gets
the
better either. Like that is a spoiler, I guess, but like he's
oh,
always
that's okay.
useless at his job.
I
So
mean, I feel like that's for the style of story, the style of characters they create in this game, it wouldn't. That's an anime thing. Like anime
yeah.
characters, unless you're the main character or like some type of important character, you really don't grow.
Nope. No
Unless they
room for
kill you.
that.
Like you're usually used as a plot device
Yeah.
when they kill you off. That's usually what it is. Like that character won't grow at all, but eventually they'll get killed, and then it will cause the main character to change.
Yes.
Usually, I'm at least from what I'm thinking about anyway. But I don't even remember. Apparently, the prosecutor in the first episode is Winston Payne.
So he's a recurring character.
Is he okay?
Because with every Ace Attorney game, they write the first case as if it's somebody's first Ace Attorney game. Even
Smart.
though you shouldn't play them out of order, some people like me do. And they have to make sure that it's welcoming and that they're not going to miss too much story if they don't really know what's going on. So Winston Payne and like various other characters that are very similar are always the prosecutor in the first case, and he's always not very good at his job, and he's always like got some weird hair stuff going on. Like that's a recurring joke, is that like his hair falls off. It's weird.
I'm gonna look up a picture of him now just so I can get a. Oh, I know exactly who you're
Yeah.
talking about now. The picture, I don't know which game this is from, but I'm pretty sure it's not the first one. But he's got like a mullet going on.
Yeah, so
That
there's various versions of him. I think there's one of him in the past, there's one of him in a different country,
is
there's
he
one of
always
him.
semi bald?
Yeah, yes. There are a few like flashback cases, and there's at least one where he's like a young, hip guy. He still looks old, but like he has hair, and then when you beat him in the first case, his hair comes off. Like it's like a toupee or something. I forget anyway.
That's really funny, actually. I love that. I love
Yeah.
I love those kind of sad sack characters are really fun.
Yes.
You ever watch Scrubs?
Yeah. He's
I think
Ted.
of Ted. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a sad sack, am I? Ted, your pen exploded. Oh.
I don't even think he's as cool as Ted because I don't think he's sort of aware that he's a sad sack. But yeah, he is.
Ted is my favorite character in Scrubs, one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have Manfred von Karma, who is
Mhm.
kind of like the big bad of the like the over. If he feels like the overarching big bad of the first game, does he
Yes.
appear in the others? I'm assuming he does. Like I feel like that's.
Have you played the fifth case?
I did not finish the fifth case. I
Okay.
don't mind spoils for that though.
Um,
Because the credits rolled after the fourth one. I'm like, oh, I beat it, and then the fifth one came up. I'm like, oh man, I don't feel like doing this one now.
the fifth
So,
one is, fun fact, the longest case in
oh god,
any Ace Attorney game. It's a good case. It's a slog at times. But it does have a lot of like touchscreen stuff, so that's fun at least.
I did play a little bit of it of the specifically the fifth case in prep for our recording because I was like, well, I haven't beaten this portion yet, so I'm still wandering around the parking garage looking at the. I mean, I do like one thing I like that this game does is that each case it doesn't it doesn't feel like a monster of the week style of writing where like, in like Power Rangers or like if we're going with a Marvel comic thing where like each episode or each issue is like, well, here's just some random guy, here's some random enemy, and there's not really any plot progression. It's just like here's a separated episodic story, and it doesn't really tie in with any others. I know there are some like that. Like I think of like the samurai one, which I know there are some ties between the earlier cases and the later ones in the first game, but like the middle episode, the samurai one, I feel like is very kind of standalone.
Yeah, that's the case in pretty much every single Ace Attorney game. You have the first case, which is always like kind of easy. The prosecutor is the same guy almost every time. And like
Winston Payne.
usually there's some plot device to explain that you've forgotten how to be a lawyer. Like every single first case is like this. Then there's the second case, which gets into the story of the entire game and is usually quite exciting. Then there's the third case, which is usually like a lull in momentum. It's a case that isn't involved in the main plot of the game and is not always very good. That's not
Mhm.
the case in every game, but most of them. And then the fourth case is usually like, time to wrap up the main story. And then it's a really long case. And usually you or one of your friends is implicated in murder. Like, it's weird that that's always what happens, but like, you would not believe how many times Phoenix Wright or Maya or Mia or someone else or Edgeworth gets accused of murder. It's a lot.
And Edgeworth is the one in the first game.
Yes.
He's accused of murder in episode 4. The 5th episode, what I did see is that
Mhm.
the was it the lead prosecutor is the one who gets I think she's the one that gets framed. She is the sister of um Emma or no, is it Emma? No, not
It's
Emma
Emma
Sky.
Sky.
Is it Emma
Uh,
Sky? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Emma Sky is his defense aide in Rise from the Ashes. Yeah.
yeah,
Her sister is the one that's on trial, and she is the head prosecutor, like Miles's
yes.
boss. And then Miles is the one that has to Edgeworth is going to prosecute her.
Mhm.
And obviously I mean, I don't know what the background is yet, but obviously she's being a patsy for someone and taking the fall for something. Otherwise, she wouldn't be going along with it. Similarly to how Miles was pretty much willing to go down with the ship in the 4th episode. But
Yeah,
we'll get into all the episodes. Right? Is there any other characters that I'm missing? We kind of touched on Maya. She is the sister of your mentor
yeah,
after your mentor gets murdered in the second episode of the entire series.
yeah,
And uh yeah, she is. Oh, she's a spirit medium in training. I forgot about that. She can talk to the dead at times, but it's generally she's just used to channel Mia when you have the. It's like the spirit bomb portion of the of the case where it's like you're about to get down and out, but everyone gave you their energy, and it's
yes.
Mia. It's Mia who comes
It's
in.
very
So
anime. Yeah,
it,
that's
that's what I
good.
love about it. I when I so like I said, the first time I played it was like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and I was not expecting it to be as anime as it was, and I was very pleasantly surprised by that because it's been years since I've been into anime. Mainly the fandom kind of killed it for me, unfortunately. So
Mm.
I couldn't. It's hard for me to get into it now. So that and I never have time to watch TV, but I liked that this was so anime. I really enjoyed that. But is there any characters that that I didn't touch on, or any ones that you wanted to elaborate on further?
We haven't talked a lot about Will Powers. Will Powers becomes like a friend of Phoenix's who does pop up again in later games. Um, and this is a case where he is on the stand accused of murdering his co-star Jack Hammer. There's this whole
Hmm.
thing about the Steel Samurai, which is an ongoing TV show in the Phoenix Wright
I love that.
universe
I
that
love that they do
actually
that.
like Phoenix eventually uses it as like his ringtone, like the Steel Samurai theme. It becomes like a really big deal. Um, and Will Powers plays the Steel Samurai, and he's accused of killing the I forget what his name is, like the evil magistrate. That's it. Who's played by Jack Hammer. And Will Powers is described multiple times in the game as a monster, not because he did a murder or didn't do a murder, but because he looks like a monster, he's like, oh, I can't ever take off my costume in front of children because they will be scared to find out that their like TV hero looks like me. And you're expecting him to look like Beast from Beauty and the Beast. He's a
Yeah,
very normal looking man. He's got like a big face. That's about it. Like he's fine. He looks like Wolverine. That's
I'm looking.
it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. He just looks like Wolverine. I mean, I could see if it was a really little kid and if he's like 6 feet tall, it'd be a little scary.
Yeah.
He's got a very thick tuft of hair on his chest,
Yes, he does. He could just like zip up his hoodie and it
and
would
that would
be
probably me
fine.
and shave those mutton chops.
Yeah, but
Like,
he's supposed to be like a heart of gold kind of character, like Beast from
mhm.
Beauty and the Beast. But he's really not as scary as the story sort of wants him to be. And I looked up, like in Japanese, is this a particular monster that they're referring to that looks like this? But no, they just like call him a monster. They're just like, I'm hideous. Don't look at my face. But like, he's just a guy.
I wonder if it's just one of those things where it's like a almost like a moral tale type of thing where it's like not just because someone's scary doesn't mean they're a bad person type of thing,
Yeah,
but very like it's played under the radar. It's played very nuanced. That's what I was trying to say. Maybe nuance isn't the right term, but it's not overt. It's not
yeah.
very overt. It's just they're not making it as a sticking point. It's just kind of there. Like I feel like it's something that like kids could learn from it without them actually having to be like, "Hey, kids." At the end, like have like some PSA at the end of the episode or something.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say, and I could not think of the word for the life of me. Holy shit. So, is there any other characters you would want to talk about before we talk about the episodes or the gameplay and then the episodes?
No, I think the characters get much more interesting in the second and especially third game. So
I
in
need
this
to play it.
one, like the characters are good. Steel Samurai is great. He's not really a character, that's a made up TV show, but obviously
It should
Miles,
be real.
it should. And it probably is. They've made an Ace Attorney anime and a live action film and an
I
anime film.
saw that. I didn't watch it. Was it good?
Which one?
Any of them?
The anime I've been watching recently, and it's pretty good, but it is just an anime retelling of the first game. Like there's not really
Okay. Oh,
anything
I could have
unique
just
in it.
watched that as a reference
You
set
could.
instead of having.
Yeah,
I should have.
it's very good.
That's good to know. Um, the gameplay, the way that the game actually plays, or turns out, or progresses through the story is that since you're playing as Phoenix, you're given a case in each episode, and you have to find. This is a very boiled down version of it, but just to kind of generalize it, you find evidence, and then you. Thankfully, you can't progress until you find all the evidence you need. So it's not like you can miss out on something. At least to
Mhm.
my memory, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. Um, you can't progress to the next section of the game until you find all the evidence that you need or that the game requires you. Once you find all the evidence, then you go to the trial portion of the episode, and there's multiple trial portions in the episode. Like there's searching around and finding it's almost point and click adventure-esque where you're going to different sections of the game world, and you're having to talk to different people and find different items to use for evidence. And once you have enough evidence and you make it to the trial portion of or a trial portion of the episode, you are usually cross-examining some witness, and you have to catch them in a lie using the evidence that you have. I'm really bad at this. I like the first case. It's easy, like obviously, but there's a lot of them where it's like there is some where I'm like, well, okay, I think I could cross-examine it, or I think I could catch him alive with this, and I was wrong. It would just
Yeah,
so it takes a little bit of getting used to, but maybe it's my anxiety. But every time I would get one wrong, I'm like, I would save right beforehand, and I would just turn off the DS and turn it back on. I'm like, all right, let's try the
yeah.
next one, and have to go through all the dialogue again.
So it's interesting that you bring that up because my partner played the first three games on the Nintendo Switch, which I am both for and against because the Ace Attorney trilogy, which is what it's called, is the first three games with remastered. I'm doing the quote thing with my hand, remastered visuals, and I think it looks ugly as sin because the original games are this like really quite beautiful, like not really pixel art, but because the DS is so low resolution, it ends up looking like pixel art.
It's like anime pixel art, but
Yeah,
like high resolution
like
pixel art.
detailed pixel art. And so there's all
Yeah.
these lovely animations and like very subtle visual effects that like are actually very well done for a game that was made probably with a very low budget, both time and money wise, and also only 7 people. Like it's a surprisingly beautiful game. And the remastered visuals are they gave every single frame to someone. This is me imagining how they made it. I don't think this is actually the process, but they gave every single frame to someone and were like, draw over it. And so, like, all these beautiful pixel art effects have been kind of lost in this sort of like smudgy HD retexturing of everything. And I just don't think it looks pretty. I would have preferred them to upscale the pixel art. Obviously, they had a reason not to do that, but I don't know what it is. However, the trilogy, because it's a re release, also has an improved save system. You can save at any point and you don't have to end
Ooh,
the game to save.
that's very nice.
I forgot that that's how the original games worked until I insisted that after finishing the trilogy, my partner needed to play Apollo Justice on the DS as God intended. And so now I'm watching him and I'm like, oh, this art is so beautiful. Oh, it's just like the original games. And then he's like, oh, this is a really difficult part of the case. I'm going to save. And every time you save, it goes save game and suspend play. And you don't have an option. You don't have the option to say, no, just save game. I don't want to suspend play. So every time you want to save and, save scum a little bit, you have to like quit the game and then reopen the game. That's stupid.
I mean, I think as much as I like the ease of that saving, I think you almost need that difficulty because then it actually has a punishment for the player for
Yeah.
kind of abusing the system a little bit. Like, don't get me wrong, I abused it and I had to wait. That was my punishment, just
Yeah.
waiting through all the text. But I feel like that type of thing it sucks, but at the same time, like that's where the challenge is. Now, I never did. What happens when you get enough of the things wrong? Like if you try to catch someone in line, you get enough of
Yeah.
them wrong. What happens? Does it just restart or
So,
I never did that because I saved it. I
I
guess.
believe that in the DS games you have like 5 exclamation marks. Is that right?
Something maybe three or five,
Yeah.
I forget. But you have basically a certain number of strikes to get.
Hmm.
You have a chance to get it right, and if you don't get it right in a lot amount of tries, then
Yeah.
I don't know what happens.
In the later games, they make it a little green health bar. So rather than losing 1 point every time you mess up, it's like, okay, you lose 10% of your health. Oh, this one's a big deal. You lose 50% of your health, and so on.
Okay.
So it's a little more nuanced in the later games. In the trilogy, I think they updated the first game to also be a health bar. That's just a small aside. Fun fact about Ace Attorney. So often when you get enough things wrong, the judge goes bang, bang, bang with his little gavel, and he goes, that's it. I've seen enough. I don't need to see any more testimony or evidence. I know who's guilty. It's that person, the one you're trying to defend. And then it goes and spells out guilty. And then the court doors close and it goes, hey, do you want to try that again? And it'll kick you back to like a checkpoint, usually. The thing with that is it can come at a really weird time because if you're at the very start of a case and you mess something up and the judge is just like, this person obviously seems guilty, so I shut up, Phoenix, this person's guilty. But there can be sometimes when you mess up at like the very final piece of evidence you need to prove that someone else is guilty, and everyone in the courtroom knows exactly who did it. It's the guy sweating on the stand, it's not the guy you're
Yeah.
defending. But if you mess up at that point, the judge will be like, that's it, I've seen enough. It's that person. And you're like, no, come on. A little more leniency here would be
It's
appreciated.
like I've proven this guy has been lying like 3 out of the last 4 times, and you're
Yeah.
not going to like allow a second of doubt with this. Come on.
And the judge is like, no, I have somewhere to be. Shut up. Yeah.
I love how the judge isn't named in all of, at least in the first game. Does he ever get a name in any of the other ones?
No.
No.
There is, at one point in the first 3 games, another judge. It
Mm,
gets very exciting. He's
spicy.
Canadian,
Oh,
and they make it really, really obvious because he's constantly saying things like hoser and talking about hockey. And it's like, yeah, we get it. I like him. I'm glad he's not the permanent judge.
I've never seen a Canadian stereotype that could be considered offensive, but it's
I mean, I
it's
was making my partner is Canadian. I was making him play it. And he was mostly just like, ah, this guy.
it's
So I
it's
think
like
it's
what
fine.
it's like what us Americans think Canadians speak like.
Yes, very much. Yes. And
Oh
also,
yeah,
like, it was done by the translators. Like, I haven't looked this up, but I presume that in the Japanese version, the judge is speaking in some particular Japanese dialect where all the players would go, oh, this guy is clearly from this region of Japan, and that's funny. And
I'd be
the translators were
curious.
like, oh, let's switch it to Canada. Why
I,
not?
I'd be curious what the localization team did for the second and third game because apparently, so there wasn't any intention. Like Shu Takumi knew the first game was going to come over to North America, so he
Mhm.
deliberately wrote it in a way that could be like, this is like this isn't Tokyo, this is Los Angeles type of
Yeah.
thing. Like that could be localized easily to a different market. Um, the but since the first game didn't come out right away in North America, 2001, it came out in North America in like '05 or something
Yeah.
like that. I don't know when it came out over for you over in the UK. Let me see if it even has it on Wikipedia. 2006.
Okay.
2000 March 16th 2006, and it was October 12th 2005 in North America. But the original, obviously, it was wow. It's 4 years to the day because it was October 12th 01 was the Game Boy Advance release of this one. So he didn't expect the second and third game to get a release outside of Japan. So he didn't write those games in a way that would localize easily. And I would be curious. I'd have to see if I doubt he would. He didn't do it, but I had Jeremy Blaustein on the
Mhm.
podcast. I don't know if you probably played some of his games. He did Silent Hill 2. He localized Silent Hill 2 and 3. He did Metal Gear Solid. He did others. He did work on Pokemon actually. The
Cool.
cartoon.
Yeah.
Um, but he was telling I'm very curious how the localizers did it for this because there's a lot of stuff like the example he gave, and I'm sorry, you probably already know this. You work in the industry, but I still think it's a good for people who didn't listen to that episode. He was talking about how when he was localizing the Pokemon cartoon, Professor Oak has a brother and he likes to speak in puns.
Mm.
And I didn't watch Pokemon up to this point, so I don't know what the brother's name is. I forget, but basically the they would speak in puns, but if you were to translate that pun directly, it was like he gave an example of like instead of Pikachu, it was like Pimanchu or something like that, which would mean like steak. I don't even know if that's the correct thing, but that's the idea. But it's clearly a Japanese pun,
Yeah.
Pikachu and Pimanchu. You can't say steak chew in English. That's not a pun. That doesn't work. And so he's talking about like a lot of the difficulties of translating things like that, localizing things like that. Like, how do you keep those intentions while keeping a pun that still fits with what's happening? And it was just a whole thing. So
Yeah.
I'm very curious as to the second and third game in the series, how easy or difficult it was for the localization team to really make it work, you know?
Yeah. I mean, localization and translation is sort of one of my interests and specialties to a certain
Oh, okay.
degree.
Well, and I'm sorry if I said any.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
okay. I
I
hadn't heard this person talking before, so that's fun. But I have a degree in languages, and I wrote my dissertation on the subject of translation and how you can never actually translate something perfectly because I think the way I put it, you can either get the sound of something. So if something has a lot of S's in it, you can translate it to have a lot of S's in it if you're trying to make a point about snakes. I don't know. You can get the
steak.
sense, which is to, like, as you're saying, translate a pun directly. And then it's not funny, but at least the person reading will be like, oh, okay, so they were trying to make a pun about steak. That makes sense. Or you can translate like the actual sort of feeling of it. I forget the word I used, but like you can translate.
The tone of it, like the emotional tone, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what
or
you used,
like
but
with puns, you can translate the fact that it was supposed to be funny and it was supposed to be food related. And you could sort of, especially with video games when there are actual visuals, because I wrote my dissertation about poetry, so you didn't have to worry about visuals. With a video game, when you're like looking at a picture of steak and someone's making a pun about Pikachu and steak, you have to really translate it. That gives you a lot of limitations. You have to translate it with all of these things in mind. Um, and in the second and third games, there is a lot more Japanese culture. And they made the mistake in the first game of being very much not like this is set in somewhere. It's like this is set in Los Angeles, California, America. And you're like,
yeah.
oh, okay. That's going to make it really weird when in the second game, you go to a traditional Japanese village. And so they had to translate that as it's like a cosplay village where everybody just like dresses
Bravo,
up
man.
as like
Bravo.
well, it gets worse in later games. Like the one that just came out is set in like the past that I think is the Meiji era, although maybe I'm
Mhm.
getting that mixed up with the new Pokemon, which is also set in the past. But it's very much set in Japan partly, and it's starring Japanese characters who have Japanese names. And suddenly it's like, well, if you give them English names, they're not Japanese anymore. And like their whole story is about them being from Japan. And so Ace Attorney, which has historically always kind of fudged Japan's existence, it's always like, don't worry about it. We have samurais and like kimonos and traditional Japanese things, but don't worry about it. And now it's like, no, Japan exists actually. And you're like, oh god, we've messed up so much. And there's so many really interesting interviews with the localization team, led by Janet Su, I think. I'm pretty sure that's her name.
Yes. I watched the Did You Know Gaming video on this
Yeah.
to get a lot of the facts, but like,
Yes.
um, then they mentioned her, so that's
Yeah.
I didn't know that she did a lot of interviews. There, that's really interesting. Sorry,
She,
continue what you're
I'd say a
saying.
lot. There's like three, but that's a lot
That's a
for
lot.
no one
That's a
talks
lot for
about
localization.
localization.
No one does. It's a
And it's something that I genuinely love reading about and writing about because like hopefully I have a lot of knowledge about it, even though I don't speak Japanese. I know
if
what
you
it's
would
like to
want me
translate things.
to, if you'd be curious, I could probably get you in touch with Jeremy Blaustein if
Yeah,
you'd be interested. I
yeah,
don't know.
do it.
I don't know what you would want to speak to him about, whether it's for an
Me
article, just
neither.
for funsies, but
Maybe.
I could ask him if he's interested. He's very nice. He is in Japan. He has a
Okay.
company called Dragon Baby that is a
Oh,
localization company.
that's fun.
Um, yeah, he actually just started up the Twitter account for it too.
Yeah.
And he actually just started his Twitter account again. He got off of it because he was tired of
Yeah.
politics, which I don't blame him. Um, but yeah, so Jeremy Blaustein, actually, his sister is Maddie Blaustein, who was the voice of Meowth.
Wow, what a
Uh,
cool
well,
connection.
I mean, unfortunately, she did pass away in 2000. I don't know why I feel
Oh
the need to bring that up,
no.
but I feel like people are going to look that up and be like, "Oh, Maddie Blaustein." She unfortunately passed away in 2009, late
Mhm.
in the 2000s. So, but yeah, that's how he mentions it on the episode that he was on, where that's how he got involved in Pokemon was because his sister was the voice of Meowth.
Yeah.
But you're right. Localization is something I actually would love to have more localizers on because there's so much that is unknown about it. Have you ever heard of Legends of Localization?
I feel like I have, but
It's you probably really like it then. It's a website
yeah.
run by a guy named Clyde Mandolin. He's known as Mado online. I think that's his online handle.
Uh-huh.
Um, he actually has a series of books called Legends of Localization. He only has two of them out right now. But basically, he writes articles about because he's a localizer, so he'll
Mhm.
look at the original Japanese text, he'll look at what it was localized as, and kind of try to decipher it for the layman like me to be like, well, this is probably why they translated it this way or they
Yeah.
localized it this way or that way. And he wrote a book. I'll show you after we're done recording. He has one on the original Legend of Zelda. which was really interesting because he breaks down all the different sound differences, and then he has one on Earthbound, which is a much thicker book, understandably so, since that's an RPG.
Yeah.
But anyway, we I should man, we could keep on going about localization, but we're here to talk Phoenix Wright. Um,
Sorry.
don't
Ah.
you do not need to apologize. This is a lot. I'm having a ton of fun right now. But so I feel like just because I don't want to keep you too much longer, I know we're getting close to that time, close to your out. So I figure what we could do is talk about the stories through the 5 episodes pretty briefly, and we can wrap it all up.
Mhm.
So we've talked about it. We've probably spoiled a couple things here and there. So just for the listeners now, we're about an hour in. So if you don't want this game completely spoiled, this is your spoiler alert for the rest of the episode. Um, we're just going to kind of talk about the 5 cases, though I don't know anything about the 5th case, so I hopefully can rely on you
Yeah.
to talk about the 5th one.
Mhm.
The first one, like you said, it's the tutorial case. It's the one that's teaching you how to be a lawyer and teaching Phoenix how to be a lawyer
Yeah.
in this fictional world, fictionalized Japanese version of Los Angeles. And basically the whole premise of the first one is your your best friend from childhood, Larry Butts. I'll never get tired of saying that. Larry Butts. He is on trial for allegedly murdering his girlfriend.
Mhm.
He is a loudmouth and hot-headed guy, and he's very. I don't know. Is he like a? Is womanizer too strong of a word? But he's like really into flirting.
Yeah, he's kind of like Brock from Pokemon in that, like,
Okay.
he doesn't sleep around like a womanizer, but he definitely dates around or like falls in love with a new girl every 5 minutes. Yeah,
It's another Officer Jenny every 5 minutes. Jenny or
exactly.
Nurse Joy.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it's funny. A lot of the characters in the cases, I didn't catch this the first time that I played it. You might have already because you're probably smarter than I am. The freaking witness for this case is Mr. Saw It,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize the pun there.
There's a lot of that. It gets
I
really tortured in some of the later games because they
I
run
feel
out
really
of
dumb for not
puns.
noticing it. I mean, oh my god! I couldn't believe that went over my head. I was
Yeah.
literally watching a video on it, like a plot synopsis today, and the guy mentioned it on the video. I'm like, God damn it, Josh! Like,
Yeah,
how
but
did you not notice
there are
that?
some names where you're, like, saying them over and over to yourself in your head. You're like, "I don't get it," and it just turns out, like, Jack Hammer, who's from another one of the cases, that's a pun. It doesn't reference anything. That's just the name of some equipment. Like, mm,
But basically, you have to get your friend off of the murder charges, get him, exonerate him, and pretty much I don't believe there's even any like evidence gathering in this episode. Is there? Does
no,
it go straight?
the first case always begins in court. There's no investigation bit.
That's what I thought. And
Yeah.
you just kind of go through and you pick apart this dude's testimony, which I don't remember any specifics of. If you remember, feel free to go into it. I don't remember many of the specifics other than just obviously Mr. Butts didn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing revolves around there being a clock. Uh, and this guy was like, "Oh, I didn't enter the room, so I couldn't have killed her." And then you prove that actually he did enter the room. And there's also a power cut at the time. And there's a bunch of other like coincidences that mount up, basically. And you manage to say, "Well, you did enter the room." And then he's like, "Yeah, but I didn't touch the clock." And you're like, "How do you know it was a clock?" And he was like, because it's just a statue. And it turns out that the clock, when you like twist its head, it says the time, which is like, why would you want a clock that does that? So it turns out that basically the only way he could have known that the clock was a clock is if he used it as a murder weapon.
And it
And
was
then he
Mr.
pulls his toupee off and throws it at you.
Man, what is it with this game and toupees? Like
I don't know.
both the
Yeah.
lawyer and this guy apparently had a toupee. That's funny.
Mhm.
The second episode is called the Turnabout Sisters. Probably should have mentioned the first episode is called the First Turnabout, and I believe the Japanese name for this game is Turnabout Trial, right? If I
Yeah,
remember
so
correctly.
I still don't fully know what a turnabout is. There's a lot of stuff that's in the Phoenix Wright games that I'm like, is that just sort of like a weird translation? Or do I just not know anything about lore? It's probably a bit of both.
Let me see if I can find. I have the interview that I was reading still up on my phone.
Mhm,
They mentioned something about the title because the game did go through a couple different titles before they ended up on Turnabout Trial, but I
mhm.
can't
I was
remember.
looking at that as well, and I have it here somewhere. Yeah, originally it was called Surviviban, but pronounced in Japanese, which I don't know how to do, which is a
Uh,
portmanteau of survival and Saiban, which is court.
oh,
So
it was. I think it was because the way they have it written here is Saibaban,
Cyberban.
like Sabaiban.
Yeah.
Sa, Saba, no, Sabaiban.
Okay. I know that the games in general are in Japanese known as Gyakuten Saiban, but I don't know what that means. I mean, Saiban is court because it just told me that, but I don't know what a Gyakuten is. Maybe that's turnabout.
That might be it. So like Turnabout
Yeah.
Trial, Turnabout Court. I don't know. Japanese is such an interesting. I took 4 semesters of it and I barely
Yeah.
remember any of it.
Yeah.
Um, but I loved learning about it. My favorite part about Japanese, no genders on nouns and objects.
Oh, thank
I
God.
hated in I took German in high school and I did not understand why a chair had to be masculine or feminine or
Mm.
neuter and why and it's the same thing with a lot of other languages like in Europe and stuff like that, like Germanic, and I don't know about the Romance languages, but it irked me to no end because to conjugate it you had to remember not only what the gender of the object was but then also which tense you're in instead of just remembering the tense.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
hated it
I
so
have
much.
done French, German, Italian, Latin, and ancient Greek, all of which
I
have
don't know why I'm explaining this to
so
you. I
many
apologize
genders.
once again.
No, it's okay because like Greek, ancient Greek is the worst because it's something like 27 different words for the because you have to do them in every case and every gender. I think German is the same. And there's 3 genders.
Yeah. In German for the, it was der for masculine, die for feminine, and das for neuter, from what I remember,
Yeah.
or neutral. And it just drove me up a wall trying to remember all the different um, things. But I remember Japanese, while they didn't have that, they had a lot of different counting systems, which was really
Mhm.
frustrating. Because like, it bothered me that they would have like one counting system for like money and then another counting system for when I say system I shouldn't say it's like it's counting differently, it's the same, you're still counting 1 2 3 4 5, but they just have different words for 1 2 3 4 5 and so on depending on
Yeah.
what type of object you're counting, like flat objects, tall thin objects, instead of just ichi ni san and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. It was it drove when my teacher was teaching me that. I'm like, are you why? What purpose does this serve? Just it's one table. You don't
Yep.
need this. Okay. Second episode, Turnabout Sisters. This is where your mentor Mia Fey gets murdered in the very beginning, and her younger sister Maya is framed for it, and you have to get Maya off on the murder charges because she clearly does not. She could not hurt a fly. Like
Yeah.
Maya's from what I remember, Maya's a really sweet character. But all right, we'll just do some quick overviews. Maybe instead of spoiling it, we can just give just a brief synopsis of what each case is about, and then that way it doesn't necessarily spoil each episode for the listeners. I'm honestly surprised that we were able to get an hour and 10 out of what we've talked about so far because I was worried I was just going to freeze. I was worried that I was going to be like, I'm so bad with remembering story details. It's one of the worst things, especially as a podcaster. But so I was really worried. I'm like, all right, well, I need to really research all this, and hopefully we can get enough to like so we won't have to rely too much on all the story stuff. But this has been fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on. Um, second or third episode, Turnabout Samurai, is about you saving. We mentioned him before, Will Powers, who is the Steel Samurai on a kids TV show, a fictional kids TV show called Steel Samurai, and you have to get him off for murder because he is he had allegedly killed his, was it the producer of the show, Jack Hammer?
He kills his co-star who plays the
Co-star, that's
villain.
what it is.
Yeah.
And who ends? Oh, I forgot. I just said we weren't going to give spoilers.
Yeah, that's why I was stopping myself from revealing who did the murder.
Oh my gosh, I was just about to give it away.
Yeah.
In the fourth episode, your rival Miles Edgeworth is the one that's on trial, and you have to. This one was a really interesting one for me because it really it reveals a lot more of Edgeworth's past. And like I really enjoyed learning about why he became a prosecutor, and like it really sets into like the fourth episode of this game specifically really tells a story about how your dead mentor Mia became who she was, like what set her on her path, what set Miles on his path, and obviously in turn what set Mia's sister, on her path, because it's all tied together. It's one of those ones where you end up solving two mysteries with the same two murders with the same case.
Yeah.
And I thought that made it super interesting for me, and it made it very fun. Now the fifth one, I don't know as much as about. So would you mind talking about the fifth episode?
So the fifth one is very long and quite convoluted because it deals again with stuff that happened in the past and stuff that's happening in the present, and you can't solve one without the other. So when I say it gets convoluted, like you never lose the thread while you're playing it. Um, the Ace Attorney games do a good job of kind of leading you along a little linear path. So you're never like, oh God, sorry, who's this guy? What time period is this? So basically, Lana Skye, who's the head prosecutor, despite also being like 26, like, was there no one older who could take the job? Whatever.
Maybe
She's
she's just the
dressed.
best one.
She could be. She's dressed kind of like a military general. Like she's got this very fancy uniform on. And you meet her younger sister, Emma Skye, who is a teenager, but really wants to be like a forensic scientist, I think. Lana has been accused
And
of
she's really
murdering.
curious. It's really curious what she chooses to write down as notes. From what I remember, I was playing it just a couple of days ago. She writes the most random things down.
Yeah, yeah. She gets more character development.
Okay.
But early on, she's very young, not particularly helpful. But that's fine because her sister's been accused of murder. Whatever. So Lana's car, no, Edgeworth's car, has a dead body in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they accuse Lana Skye of doing the murder. It's a detective. It's not really important, like who he is. I guess his name's Bruce, but
like the shark from Finding. I don't know why that's the first thing
yeah.
that popped in my head from Finding Nemo. Friends are fish, not food.
So Phoenix has to like prove that not only did Lana not do it, but like every other case, he has to prove who did do it. So he digs into like the past and finds out that there was another murder of a guy called Neil Marshall, and that, you know, a bunch of I can't spoil it, but basically a bunch of stuff happens, and then he proves that Lana didn't do it. I can't tell you how, but he does, and it's great. The annoying thing is that at the start of the case, Lana Skye is like, no, let me go down for this murder. I did it. So the
Yeah.
whole time in the court, she's trying to confess. She's like, no, I did. I definitely did the murder. And you're like, can you please stop that? Because my job is to make you not go to jail, please. And so you have to not only like find out why she thinks she should go to jail, but like actively like find a way to convince her that it's going to be okay and that actually this guy did it, and so on. It's a difficult case. It's very long. Because it's an extra case that was made just for the DS, it has a lot of touchscreen stuff. Emma Skye being a forensic scientist in training has a lot of like fingerprint powder and stuff like that. Like that's her whole deal, is like, oh, here's a thing that you have to touch the screen and then you have to blow on the screen to blow the
Oh
fingerprint
wow,
powder away.
they do all that stuff.
They went all
Okay.
out. And then they didn't bring those mechanics back for like 3 games. Very weird.
I'm kind of okay with that. I love the DS's touchscreen, but I always hated it when they try to force gimmicks onto you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works if it's done well, but it's very, I don't know. For me, with every game I've played, it's always been very hit or miss. Like I still remember playing what's the first Zelda on the DS? Not Spirit Tracks, Phantom Hourglass.
Mhm.
And there's a section where you have to like you're buying something from a merchant, and you have to shout for a good deal,
Yeah.
and they just troll you. They fucking troll you. Because it's like when I was playing it, I was on an airplane, so I can't shout.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how am I going to do this? So I just took my finger over the microphone and I
Mhm.
just went like I just rubbed it back and forth real fast,
That's what I did
and
too.
and then the guy goes, "Oh man, you know what you could have done? You could have just clapped. You probably looked like a real idiot if you would have just shouted." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Are you serious? Are you serious right now?" Um, oh, it made me so upset. Like not really, but I was it made me upset. I'm like, you could have gotten me in trouble on this airplane.
Yeah.
Is there anything with these stories? Like I know I glossed through all these stories. I feel like the way you did a lot, you told a lot, you went into a lot more detail than I did with the first 4 episodes. So if there's anything you want to go through with these first 4 episodes, I like go into it because I feel like I did kind of like a more of like a one thing led to another style of storytelling where there was not a lot of detail and just kind of just blanket statements. You ever hear that Brian Reagan bit about that? I mean, this is
No.
a bit of a side. He talks about how like he hates it when writers use the phrase "one thing led to another" because
Mhm.
he's like, "What kind of lazy writing is that? Isn't that your job as a writer to say what one thing led to another?" And he goes, "Like, imagine you're on a museum tour. It's like, as a young man, Adolf Hitler was rejected in his application to art school. One thing led to another." And then the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on the sovereign nation of Japan. It's like, whoa, this is some pamphlet. Sorry, that was a side tangent. But yeah, is there anything that you would like to talk about with the episodes that I just kind of glossed over, which is probably a lot?
The main thing that I think I took away from like going over these episodes again is that when you've played more Ace Attorney games, the second case, the one where Mia is murdered, is kind of weirdly throwaway. Like
Hmm.
this character, Mia Fey, becomes really important in the later games. Like you get flashbacks where you get to see her or even play as her at one point. And because Maya Fey is a spirit medium and can talk to ghosts, you get to like hang out with Mia a lot as a ghost. Um, and so it's weird that she died in such a strange, pointless way. Like, I know that's how murder actually works, is that like there's not really a lot of meaning to it. There's
But in
sometimes it's
terms of the
just,
storytelling thing, you're right. It's very
yeah.
throwaway.
Yeah, and like Phoenix isn't very upset for like the entire case, and it's kind of disappointing because this person meant a lot to him. And in the anime you actually get to see a lot more of like Mia and Phoenix being upset about this thing, but in Ace Attorney the video game, Phoenix is like, "Ah, geez, well, time to go to court." And he's even like making jokes and stuff during court.
Yeah, yeah.
Um and like it was only the second case in the entire series, so like the characters hadn't been fully fleshed out. So it makes sense that it is this very like, this guy, his mentor died, how sad. But yeah, with everything I know about Phoenix and Mia now, it's strangely sort of dry.
I will say, even though I haven't played the second and third game, I still felt that because I remember
Mm.
when I was playing through it the first time and Mia dies, and I didn't think like I was surprised that she showed up as a ghost in in the later episodes because I'm like, oh, so she's a thing. Like she's actually important to the story in this game because in the first when she dies in the second episode, it's just so unceremonious and it just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it Like, I have no idea. Because, like you said, Phoenix didn't have much of a reaction. So me as the player was like, well, then I guess I don't need to have a reaction either, because
Yeah.
she clearly wasn't. I met her for a 30-minute episode, if that, and then she's just gone at the beginning of the what. So there's no gravity to her death. It's just it happens. Shit happens. That's what it feels like.
They get better at that kind of storytelling in later games. There's some very sad moments later on, so look forward to that.
I
Yay.
definitely will. I feel like I hamstrung you a little bit with this episode with not playing the sequel, so I'm sorry
Yeah.
for that.
It's
Um,
okay.
I will play through. I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I will start the second one. Or should I finish episode 5 and then move on to the second one? What do you think?
I think episode 5 will sap all your energy. You can play it at any point. Like, it's mostly not really connected to the rest of the story.
Okay.
So play that when you have a lot of energy. I think if you play it before the second game, you'll be like, I don't want to see court cases for a while. So, yeah.
All right. I'll just jump over to the second one then. I have a 30-minute lunch at work that I could
Yeah.
play on. Unfortunately, I have to drive for my commute, so I can't play during my commutes, which would be ideal, but it happens. Okay. Is there any final thoughts on the first Phoenix Wright game that you'd like to talk about? Any final words before we do our goodbyes?
I think that despite a couple of the cases being like, eh, I think in general, especially the fourth case, the one where Edgeworth is accused of murder, the first Phoenix Wright game stands up pretty well against the later games that had more writers, more budget, more time. Like, it's still a really good game. So it's like it's 20 years old. It's over 20 years old now. So I
Oh
would still
God, you're right.
recommend that if anybody wants to pick it up, go for the trilogy on Switch. It's also on PC, and play the first game at least. You don't have to play the fifth case. It's really long. It's good. It's really long. But at least make it to the fourth case. And then, because if you play all of that, you're going to love Ace Attorney. Make it through the second game, which is it's fine. And then the third game is still one of my all-time favorites. So, it's a really good trilogy of games.
I'm excited to try it out. Then I mean, I'll try to start playing it now, because what I've been doing on my stream, I've been working through Assassin's Creed 2, so I can do an episode on that in the future, and
Mm.
then I usually try to pick a game to play on the side, something that I don't do on stream. Maybe it's for the podcast, maybe it's for myself. So maybe the second not Assassin's Creed game, I'm sorry. Maybe the second Phoenix Wright game will be my game that I start up again, especially since I can play it on my 3DS. It's a lot easier, especially with the kid. It's a lot easier to play. I don't have to, it's a lot easier to find time on that than it is anything else. All right. So to wrap this up, before we give our social medias and all that stuff, I normally do this for interview episodes, but my wife has been really wanting to ask a question to
Mhm.
anyone, and I normally do questions from Courtney on interviews, but she insisted on this one. So Kate, here is a question from Courtney, and for new listeners, my wife is not into games. She doesn't know any of the it doesn't matter who I have on, she doesn't know the person because they're in video games generally. So she knows nothing about anybody in the gaming industry. So she always asks interesting questions. So for this one, she asks, do you have a favorite toenail polish color? And does it have to, and she insisted I use this word, does it have to match your fingies, your fingers?
Um, I would say red. My toenails aren't currently painted, but my fingernails are, and they are red because this is a podcast and you can't see that I'm holding them up to the
Yeah, I
camera.
don't do the video portion. I'm
They
lazy.
are a very bright, vivid red. I don't usually paint my hands red. I think red is a very classic toenail color. It works with most applications. My toes aren't usually out, so I paint them just for me. My hands are where I tend to express myself a bit more with color, but I really wanted red nails. I can't remember if there was a reason. I just really wanted to have red nails for a little
Why
bit.
not?
It was very fun. So I went out and bought a red nail polish. I was actually going to plan to paint my toenails this week for the first time in maybe a year, and do them this sort of like iridescent petrol kind of color. It's
Mhm.
like purple in one light and blue in another. It's very pretty.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
I get
kind
what
of
you're saying.
wasted on the feet, but hey.
My wife, she's really big into. I'm actually. Is it weird to say that I'm kind of excited for when my daughter gets, if my daughter gets into that. If she's not into that,
Mm.
that's a okay. But if she does get into like nail polish, I'm kind of excited to have her paint my nails. Is that weird
Oh
to
no,
say?
I think
I think
that's pretty cool.
I
It's
think
going to be a terrible job though, you know.
oh well, 100%. But if she
Yeah.
can practice on me, I don't care.
Yeah.
She can practice on me. That way, she can get better for herself.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, that should do it for this episode of Still Loading on Nail Talk. Welcome to Nail Talk here on Still Loading, where we go through the top 10 colors chosen by you. No. So, Kate, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. It just made me want to play the next. I keep wanting to say Assassin's Creed, the next Phoenix Wright game. So, for those who may be interested, where can everyone find you online?
On Twitter, I am at How Not to Draw. I am the same on Instagram. On Twitch, I am Kate_Gray, Gray with an A. And you can also find the bulk of my work right now is on nintendolife.com, which is that's the website. Easy to remember. There's a lot of other places, but like if you Google me, I'm the first result, which is pretty rad. So you'll find all my stuff. Just Google me. That's embarrassing to say. Ugh.
But you can, hey, once you put so much work out into the online universe, that's what the
Yep.
easiest way to have. If you Google Still Loading, my podcast logo is the first image that comes up in the image search.
Ooh.
In fact, so much so I've had to ask people to not use it because they think it's just
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it. It's just I've had other podcasts use it. Could you just give me a credit? That's all I need.
Yeah.
Just it's a podcast. That's fine. But anyway, anything you'd like to promote specifically, or just your work over at Nintendo Life?
I mean my Twitch. Trying to get more followers on there. Come follow me.
I
It's
actually
fun.
followed you just before we recorded, so there you go.
Hooray! I'm currently doing a thing where I play through every single game on my Steam backlog.
How
Uh,
large is that backlog?
it's actually surprisingly only like a couple hundred of games. Um,
That's still a
apparently,
lot.
I thought that was a lot because, like,
Some
I'm a
people,
games journalist. I get a lot of games sent to me, but like some people have 3,000 games. So I
those
guess,
humble bundles, man. Those humble, you
yeah,
spend like $5 and you get 30 games.
yeah.
That's where I got a lot of mine. I wouldn't have. I have like I don't know how many I have on my. I'm curious now. What do I have? I'm gonna look at that right now. I apparently have 280. 280.
Okay.
Probably closer to 300 because there's a couple in my favorites. Yeah, so it's over 300 in my Steam library. But I also have stopped buying games on Steam just because I don't have time to play everything. All right. As usual, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me at stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use. That helps more people find the show. If you want to support it monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you'll get episodes a couple days early at a higher bit rate, as well as access to a patron exclusive Discord. For $5 a month, you'll get all that plus bonus mini episodes, 2 bonus mini episodes a month. So go check that out, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But the most important shout out I have is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to go support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org. I think I mentioned it on a recent episode, but at the time of recording, one of their most recent donations was they donated 2 of Microsoft's accessibility controllers, like this they're like rectangles, and they got a lot of different options for people with different physical disabilities to play games. So you can see what they're doing through that. They're doing a lot of good work, so go check them out, bitbybitfoundation.org. And that will do it for this episode. Kate, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope to have you back on again. And I will see you all next time.
Bye.